Céad Míle Fáilte, and welcome to Innovator Insight, a series of recorded videos with individuals or companies within the marine sector who are developing, producing or researching innovative marine products or services. My name is Cléine and I am the Business Development Manager for the Marine Innovation Development Centre at Páirc na Mara. The MIDC is a dedicated marine incubation centre in the Gaeltacht region, supporting early stage companies and entrepreneurs within the marine sector, focusing on aquaculture, marine technology, pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, and value-added products derived from marine sources. Today, we have Ross Campbell, co-owner and business director of Cyber Colloids. Ross has extensive experience in the food industry and seaweed processing, working in various roles in large multinational companies prior to setting up his own business. Cyber Colloids is a group of experts and companies working together to create a centre of excellence of polysaccharides and food texture, with a view to enable companies to cost effectively add value through research and innovation. Cyber Colloids is a business-led contract R&D or NPD consulting company specialised in food texture solutions based around polysaccharide and protein chemistry, agile innovation and assessment for novel ingredients, valorization of waste biomass, and extraction, optimization and scale-up capabilities. So without further ado, let's hear from Ross. So Ross, Céad Míle Fáilte, thank you for joining us here today. We want to have a little chat about, I suppose, your experience to date within the seaweed industry and to what led you to set up your company. So first and foremost, Ross, you have extensive experience within the food industry for over 40 years, working in various roles in large multinationals, namely Unilever, prior to setting up your own company. What led you to working within the seaweed processing sector and the food ingredient manufacturing?
Well, after working for several companies after college, I was approached to join Unilever here in Ireland. They had acquired a company called Biocon, based in Carrageenans, who are into natural colors, enzymes, and marine hydrocolloids. So very early on, within days of me joining, I was sent to Namibia in 1991 to get involved with the business of seaweed aquaculture in a place called Luderitz, which was growing Gracilaria seaweed for agar production. So that was my first introduction. Now in Namibia, if you look at the map, it's basically a desert for an Irishman with no grass. It was quite disturbing. But anyway, that was my introduction to seaweed. And then shortly afterwards, I was asked to go to the Philippines, to Cebu, where we had a carrageenan business, where different Namibia, the aquaculture in Philippines is very successful. So all the seaweed is grown by subsistence farmers, and then that comes into the factory. We made carrageenan out of that. So that was my introduction.
Great, very good. And what was the carrageenan used for in those days? Was it for food ingredient sector or was it for Unilever's own?
No, it was primarily the factory in the Philippines was aimed at pet food business, because the semi-refined, the carrageenan grade that we used was not qualified for food grade. But during the next couple of years, we walked away from selling to pet food because it was not very profitable. We converted the factory to food grade. And by the time we left 10 years later, we had a nice profitable business in the Philippines, in the foods market, mainly for processed meats, ice cream, chocolate milk.
Very good, very good. Again, showing the versatility of seaweed across various different sectors. Yeah. So after that, you set up Cyber Colloids. So tell me a little bit about the process of how you went about that. How did you find a niche in the market for Cyber Colloids?
Well, working for Unilever was a very forgiving company. As long as the results were going in the right direction, they left you to run your business as you felt necessary. We were sold to ICI in the late 90s, and they didn't really understand the management of natural raw materials. So I had a number of issues with senior management, and eventually they came to me in the early noughties and said, you know, you're obviously not happy. And I said, no, I'm not. And they said, well, your job is moving to the Netherlands, so you're not going to have a job in Ireland. So I took redundancy. Now, during the period of unhappiness, three of my direct reports and myself were scheming, and we thought of creating this cyber colloid thing. Cyber was just beginning to kick off. The internet was beginning to kick off. And we felt that we had knowledge. We knew a lot about a little, but we felt that we could be the honest brokers in our trade. And if we set up as technical consultants, we could advise people on how to use the hydrocolloids, how to make hydrocolloids. And that's what we did. We set up on a little boat in the middle of 2001. And here we are 20 years later and have broadened our knowledge base into proteins, into valorization of different biomasses, advising people on how to get texture into foods, really, is the big headline.
Okay, fantastic. So when we're looking at CyberColloids, you're looking at essentially the texture of food and utilizing, I suppose, different ingredients for that. What would be your client base? And kind of the goal of CyberColloids is to help R&D, isn't it, on kind of a cost-effective manner?
Yeah, as a consequence of various financial pressures on the food industry, my generation basically doesn't exist in R&D or innovation in foods. A lot of them were let go, 55 plus, and we've seemed to have come into an area where large multinationals are engaging us to support younger postdoc people, very bright people, but there's no experienced person sitting in the corner of their office or their lab. So we've just recently picked up a 3-year contract with a very large multinational on the cheese program, because the millennial generation are looking to have their cream cheese on their bagel, but they don't want the cheese to come from dairy. So they're needing to look at alternative protein sources, alternative texturizing systems. So they've taken us on to mentor the younger ones and to provide different thinking to what they exist in their lab. That's the one side of the clients. The other side of the client base is startups. We're working with a startup company in Cambridge in the UK, looking at using seaweed for packaging. So that's a very interesting program. We didn't think it was going anywhere until they got a $500,000 innovation award. So we suddenly sat up and said, we need to take these people seriously.
Very good, very good. And I suppose working day to day with startups, because you guys are on the ground for over 20 years, you have that experience to help startups as well. So there may be potential startups listening to us here today, and I'm just wondering, how did you evaluate the need for your business within this sector? Was it innovation-led? Did you experience Indigenous companies in Ireland found a need for your service, or was it to serve a particular market initially?
Well, the world that we lived in at Unilever was we were based in Ireland, but we basically came home to rest. We traveled the world. The market was a global market, still is a global market. We didn't have much interaction with Ireland in particular. But what there is in the industry is what I called a lot of technology mythology, made up by marketing people, and it got to grips that this is how the products work. And scientifically, it wasn't correct. So we decided that there was a space for a technical science-based approach to problem solving, rather than a salesman trying to sell you the product that his company happened to make. So, and that appeared to gel with people, if you excuse the pun. People came to us to say, well, look, we're trying to make ice cream. What ingredient do we need to stop the serum separation? We were able to explain the science behind the problem and then point them in the right direction of the solution. So that's where it got. Today, again, the millennial generation are very mindful of waste. My generation weren't so good at that. So people are coming to us and saying, look, we're making tomato puree and we've got a lot of tomato skins. What can we do with those? Or we're making banana puree for infant foods. What can we do with the banana skins? So we again look at the literature. A lot of very clever people have gone before us and written things down in literature and patents. So we always do that as a first check, and then we find something of interest and we explore it with our client. The other thing that I would say is let's look at the market. what are the market needs? A lot of seaweed work that's been going on at the moment is about carbon sequestration, or I want to farm seaweed because it's a point of principle and they've applied for a license. They don't know what they need to grow, and they don't know what they're going to do with the seaweed when they've grown it. So we need to understand the market needs. If it's an extract for pharmaceutical or supplements, what exactly are they looking for? What species of seaweed can we grow? So there's a fair bit of preparation to be done before anybody jumps. I say that, but with Cyber Colloids, we jumped because we needed to get out of where we were, and we had faith. We didn't really know whether the market existed or not. So the entrepreneurs do things differently. Having done it, I would say we got away with it. My advice would be more careful before you jump. And there's people like us that can help provide information, and there's others. We wouldn't be strong in the pharmaceutical or health supplements, but certainly if there's something to do with food, we could have a good idea about it. We were involved with a project called Refinery, which if you contact me, I can give you further details, where we took the cold solubles out of the seaweed and that went to personal care. We took the hot solubles and that went to personal care. And then the biomass that was left, we were able to activate the alginate within the biomass to make a gelling seaweed fiber. And I think that's a very interesting route to explore in Ireland as a biorefinery. Now, we also were asked by BIM to look at the seaweed biorefinery concept, and there is a report available on the BIM website that talks about the different extracts and things that can be done with seaweed.
Very good. And to simplify a biorefinery, what is it in layman terms?
Okay, so for being most of my career, I've been a stupid chemist in that I extracted a particular molecule and then threw everything else away. I wasn't a biologist. I didn't know what else was in the plant, nor did I care. I wasn't a nutritionist, so I didn't know that what I was throwing away was good for you. So I now say, stop thinking like a chemist, think like a chef. So in layman's terms, if you're taking a carrot out of the ground, you want to use 100% of the carrot. If we're going to take seaweed out of the sea, let's think about how are we going to get use 100% of that seaweed. If we're going to squeeze something out of it for biostimulants, what have we got left? What can we do with what's left? And aim to go for zero waste.
Perfect. So it really fits in with the circular thinking and utilizing every single inch of your raw material. Fantastic for us. It seems like CyberColloids is a one-stop shop for innovators looking to produce novel food ingredients. I suppose from your experience to date and looking at the future, where do you see the value for the seaweed ingredient sector? You touched on the dairy alternatives. Is there any other emerging market that you would recommend for those interested in extracting compounds from seaweed to go to? Or what area would you pinpoint as potentially interesting for the future?
Well, again, going back to there's a lot of the detail is available in that BIM report.
Yeah.
But in essence, there's a lot of academic reports on using seaweed extracts as antioxidants for biostimulation, for prebiotic behavior, but it hasn't really happened yet. So I don't know what has to happen to make it happen, if you know what I mean. So the seaweed is becoming very popular politically as a carbon sequestrant. So if we see what has been reported to going to happen in the North Sea, there's going to be a lot of seaweed available. So we need to get our heads around what are we going to do with it. So in the high value end, it is for supplements, it is for health, it is for pharmaceutical areas yet to be developed. That's all on the horizon. For the volume side, we are going to have to look at something like agriculture or bioplastics, where again, we see green shoots in those areas happening, but it hasn't happened at the scale. So if you're going to talk bioplastics, you're going to talk tens of thousands of tons of seaweed. If you're going to talk about extracts, you're going to call possibly hundreds of tons a year. So it's two different markets, and Ireland is yet to make its mind up on which way it's going to go. The moment that we're stimulating aquaculture farms inland, but we're not going offshore. And I think the future for any country is offshore in combination with wind farms.
Definitely some food for thought there, Ross. Some fantastic insight. So discussing innovation with a innovator like yourself, we may have some listeners in the audience that are interested in getting involved in such an industry. If you were to give advice to a newbie, a fellow entrepreneur, where do they start, and what are the key considerations that you need to evaluate at the early stage?
Understand your market, understand what's pulling. The moment I feel that the seaweed industry is pushing seaweed into the market, look at me, aren't I clever? I've grown some seaweed and it's really wonderful and it does all sorts of great things. So let's demonstrate what great things the extract or the seaweed product can do, prove its efficacy, and prove that it's addressing a need of the market. That's still isn't happening. It's been frustrating because I've been involved in the seaweed, particularly since 91, so that's 30 years. So food ingredients, the use of carrageenan, agar, and alginates is well established, and you know there's things going on that are changing that. There's a new project being launched in Iceland where they will have a biorefinery. They are going to be alginate focused, but they're going to take the cellulose out of the seaweed as well, and they're going to be looking at some of the extracts. So that is going to be the first major seaweed biorefinery of this age. Mm-hmm. So again, I think it's for understand your market. Where are you going to sell what you're going to make? And if you can't answer that question, don't get out of bed.
Definitely. And consumer buy-in, I suppose, for the seaweed sector or for the value-added products from seaweed is quite low at the moment. So that also needs to be addressed. I suppose when people think of seafood and seaweed, sometimes there is a fear of the taste element of it.
Yeah, there's a new project is kicking off in the Caribbean, and I noticed that the guy is growing the sea plants, as he calls them, in tanks, and he's going straight to consumers with the product. So he's not going to go through any middleman, and he's presenting the sea plant as a vegetable, which is how it's conceived or perceived in Asia. You know, I traveled in Asia quite a lot when I was with Unilever, and you know, you have seaweed salads as part of your meal. And it's very tasty. Somehow in the West, we're a bit more aware of seaweed than we were about 30 years ago. But you know, we still don't perceive seaweed as a positive thing. It's brown, it smells, it attracts flies on the beach, and it's not perceived to be of value. So there is an educational aspect to be done, and it is happening. I mean, there's more seaweed activity in Europe now than there was 5 years ago. So it'll happen.
Definitely, and hopefully we'll see it more commonplace on our menus in restaurants in times to come.
Well, one of the companies I would point to, which has been an innovative company and is out on a Rathlin Island, Islander, and they've learned to teach themselves the hatchery. They've taught themselves how to grow on long lines, and they sell direct to chefs. So they're right involved. One of my sayings is from the molecules to the mouth. They've done it all themselves, and they've found 15 to 20 jobs on Rathlin that wasn't there 20 years ago. So it can be done. She's the lady up there, I can't remember her name. She said that, you know, she wasted her time walking around trying to sell in the UK market. When she discovered the chefs in Germany and Switzerland who were looking for the food grade seaweed, it was bang, went. So it's finding that niche of where the market is looking for your product, and then it all fits together.
It all gels, Ross.
It all gels. That's right.
Well, Ross, thank you for this quick interview today, and you gave us fantastic insight into what CyberColloids does and some anecdotal information in terms of the seaweed industry in Ireland. It's great to get your view on that, and we really appreciate your time today.
Very good. Thank you very much for doing it.
Now,
my pleasure.
We are done.